Welcome to Masters of Regeneration Radio. Conversations with humans who dare to reimagine our place on planet Earth. Earth is changing fast. Evolution happening in real time. An intimate, circular understanding of nature and living systems. We are the land. The land is us.
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 11 of Masters of Regeneration Radio, conversations with humans who dare to reimagine our relationship to planet Earth. Our purpose is to help us all reconnect with an evolutionary understanding of life, with a cyclical understanding of nature's ability for overflowing self-organization and regeneration. How do we achieve this? Not by criticizing the existing models that no longer work for the planet and life and nature as a whole, but by creating new models, new relationships with living systems that simply make the existing ones obsolete. So I'm excited today because we have Estrella Jaramillo. Estrella is the co-founder of B-wom, a digital coach for women's health that offers users personalized care programs with habits, exercises, educational contents, and a tracking tool. Their mission is to guide women through health priorities and concerns at every stage of their lives, from pre-fertility to after menopause. B-wom has over 200,000 end users in 10 countries and helps organizations design female-adapted wellness programs. Estrella is a passionate women's health and mental well-being advocate and aims to eradicate the anxiety women suffer when it comes to their bodies and their intimate health, removing the stigma and the taboos around them. Fuck yes. Estrella is originally from Spain, but she has also advocated and spoken about women's health in Germany, Ecuador, and now runs the US and Latin America markets of the B-wom project. Estrella, welcome to Masters of Regeneration Radio.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here. I love how you gave my introduction a lot of passion.
Well, I'm really excited about this, because it's about self-care, it's about self-empowerment, and it's about addressing a bunch of things that happen to many women. I'm sure most of us men have no clue what goes on in your intimate health life, We're so unaware of just what being a woman means, what being a woman on the street means, what, I have no clue whatsoever. We're going to hear it from you right now. So Estrella has an app and a digital coach.
It's a digital coach. The care is delivered through the app and you interact with an avatar. So there's no person behind it. We create contents with specialists in different areas of women's health. And then we translate them into bite-sized, digestible content beats that women can comprehend and read and even perform from the comfort of their homes in a short amount of time, 10-15 minutes a day, but they gain all the knowledge they need at every different stage of their lives so that they know what to expect. They take tests so they understand their symptoms, and they get a lot of day-to-day recommendations and habits that are going to help them get to a healthier state. Or if they happen to have no pre-existing symptoms, they're going to learn how to prevent for issues that they might be at risk of developing depending on their age range. So everything is tech-based. The team works on developing the technological tool, and then we spread it. We're in 10 countries, as you mentioned before, and people just use it for the comfort of their own. Yeah.
Cool. And what are they doing on the app? Can you give us some details? So you have exercises for pelvic floor. I was going to say something else, but pelvic floor and core exercises. Cool. What are some of the things that a woman can experience? What is the uncomfortable part of that experience that would bring you to B-wom?
So this is what we're getting into. It's like, what happens to women? Tell me more about it. I want to know. No, it's funny because it's true. Intimate and sexual health issues are such big taboos, both for men and women. and non-binary people that nobody talks about it. So I don't know sometimes what it is to be a man and the issues that they confront. But I think that specifically with women, we inevitably go through so many transitions. Our puberty is marked by our periods. And from that moment on, our bodies start changing so much. And it's very drastic, and we're not ready for that. And we barely get any education. I remember being at school, I only got like an hour at school when people came and they told us, you're going to get your period at some point. And you're going to bleed, and this is what you use. but it really doesn't, we don't get any education as to what that entails. Like, how is that going to maybe impact your emotional health? What changes do I have to expect? How do I manage my symptoms? Is it going to hurt? There's a lot of myths, a lot of misconceptions. And the same thing that happens with your period happens all the way through to after menopause. We, the ones that chose to, we go through a fertility journey, we get pregnant. That is a bomb of a combination of changes that happen all within 9 to 10 months. And then after that, there's the postpartum recovery period that comes with its own challenges. And then we start getting older, we have menopause, a lot of symptoms happen around that time. And yet nobody's talking about it openly. Nobody tells you what to expect, what happens, but just making it more natural and more open for everyone, it would help a lot of women experience all those changes as a less isolating experience. So with all these changes, a lot of symptoms might arise. And I might give you some numbers now that come from our data or just the research that's out there. For instance, over 60% of women experience incontinence at different points of their lives. I know incontinence is something that happens both in men and women as they grow older, but women, because they give birth, their pelvic floor suffers a lot of strain and gets damaged. And so what usually happens is that right after you have a baby, you experience incontinence for some time. And then if you don't address it, it might become something chronic. A lot of women have been having chronic incontinence ever since they had their maybe second child, and we don't have care protocols in place that are accessible to all women to take care of that, because it's such a taboo. You think that you're the only one, even though obviously you're not. And there's not that many solutions out there other than wearing pads, also because of the nature of the healthcare system now being more palliative and fixing things once they've happened instead of preventing before they get worse. Another thing that happens sometimes is you might have, because of this debilitation of the pelvic floor, you might have an organ prolapse. Sexual pain after the baby is very common, even up to after 18 months of giving birth. And there's birth injuries that are very, very common. And I'm not just talking about C-section, but just tears. And there's things that we could prevent from really getting worse, and we could educate people into taking care of themselves, which is the premise behind what we build. It's take care and take charge of your own health and be the captain of your ship, and then know how to advocate for yourself when you need special attention. And in the meantime, just pay attention to yourself, listen to yourself. Don't just care about your husband, your child, your job, your mother, and not pay any attention to your body and what's happening. There's a big taboo also around menopause. It's suddenly like, oh my God, women just get so emotional. Well, we have a lot of hormonal changes that happen as we go through these transitions. And if we talked about them and understood them better, we would be able to address them better and transition in a healthy way, an empowered way, where we understand what's happening to our bodies. There's things that we should all know before we go into menopause, like how can I set myself up for success? How can I be the right way, have the right nutrition, and have the right prevention mechanisms in place, so that by the time I get to that stage, I know I'm going to have a third period of my life, kind of like the third part, right, after menopause, that is going to be just blissful and successful, and I'm going to feel healthy. So all these things. And then now we're also building a lot of new contents into the app. This was kind of like the starting point. It was this transitions, but now we're building a lot of contents about endometriosis. Is something that there was no awareness about just some years ago. And now the latest numbers show that 1 out of every 10 women suffers from endometriosis. A lot of cases of extremely painful periods where a problem that has to do with the uterine lining and it's hugely underdiagnosed, women take on average 6 to 7 years until they get diagnosed with endometriosis. And by then it might be too late because it can cause infertility. So, just like giving women resources to understand what are my symptoms, what could it be, what can I do to manage them, how can I reverse those symptoms if it's possible, and if it's not, what doctor do I go to, and how do I advocate for myself and demand the tests and information that I need. Yeah.
Is it all mostly just, how can I put it? Is it a lifestyle thing? Like I could just be informed, get the resources, and just take care of it on a daily basis and just do a series of exercises? Or is it something like that, like the preventive aspect of it?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So that's the ideal case. So here's the thing. That's when our human condition gets into place. We haven't been socialized into being super concerned and preventive about health, and that's something that I think that also at a societal level needs to change. This should be a lifestyle. There's a lot more awareness right now about how your nutrition impacts your overall health and the functioning of all of your organs and your mental health, about how meditation can help you with stress levels, anxiety, etc. And yet intimate health is something that has yet to be addressed, and it's something that is such a fundamental part of our lives, whether it is when you're relating to others, to a partner because of your sexual health, or whether it is because you're having children, or just because of these transitions. It's such a big part that we could take care of just with 10 minutes a day, and yet it's kind of like nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to point out in that direction. But it's actually something that once you become acquainted with it, it's really fulfilling. For women specifically, just starting on the very basics, understanding the function of your pelvic floor, understanding your vaginal health, and understanding your menstrual cycle is going to also help you have a better relationship with your body, understand yourself better, have better orgasms, and have better relationships with your partner. So why is this such a big taboo? We all take part in those activities. We all have sex more often or not, it depends on how lucky you are, but but why is it such a big taboo? People have children. Why are women not telling other women, hey, you're going to leave the hospital feeling like you just fell apart, but you're going to be fine, and these are things that you can do to feel better? And then also provide better support from the healthcare system. And I think it's unacceptable that at this time in age there's only a visit after, women give birth and they only get a visit after 6 weeks if there were no major complications, and there's no real protocol unless you are in a position where you can afford to pay for extra private care for you to really go back, help your body heal and go back to regular business as usual, right? To me it's just mind-boggling to see how self-explanatory it is socially that if a soccer player gets injured and he has a knee surgery, he's going to get as many months as necessary of physical therapy, and yet women carry extra weight, a human being or several ones inside of them all the time, and then they give birth to them, and yet you expect your abdominal wall and your pelvic floor to just magically bounce back. Obviously that's not the way it works.
Yeah, you need some recovery and physical therapy. Yeah. And it's funny because it's so simple that your health doesn't depend, although I know nothing about the subject, but I would imagine that it has nothing to do with a cream or a pill or anything. It's just a matter of doing some maybe PC muscle and breathing exercises. I mean, for men, as far as I know, those are the only two things that I've done for years, only because I had a kung fu teacher friend when I was 20 and gave me a tantra book that I read. And it was awesome because it was not at all about positions or anything like that. It was the whole philosophy behind it, and a bunch of breathing techniques and PC muscle exercises for strengthening your
muscles help the sexual function. Is one of their core activities or core functions, and just both for men and women, being aware of that area and exercising it correctly depending on their needs, it's something that's going to help you really when you have relationships with others. Yeah.
The PC muscle, by the way, for people who might not know what it is, it's the pubococcygeal muscle. If that's correct?
That's one of the muscles that comprises the pelvic floor. The pelvic floor is like a hammock-shaped set of different muscles and tissues and the fascia that connects it. That's goes from your pubic bone to your coccyx, and it's like a net. So there's not just one muscle; it's a combination of them, and you exercise the entire area depending on your posture. There's over 200 different types of Kegels and hypopressive exercises that you can do in different postures with different patterns of repetition that is going to activate different parts of the pelvic floor, and that is going to bring different benefits. From sometimes you need more strengthening and toning, sometimes you need more lengthening and relaxation. A lot of problems. Another problem that gets undiagnosed many times is it's not just about doing Kegel exercises, right? There's women that have sexual dysfunction and have sexual pain, and there's been this big myth about women being frigid and they just don't want to have sex. And there is something called hypertonic pelvic floor. Is a dysfunction. It's the way that I maybe hold tension on my right shoulder when I'm tense. Some women channel it to their pelvic floor muscles. Those muscles can hold tension too. And if you think about it, if they're hypertense and contracted, but they're not aware of it because we don't have that proprioception of understanding when we're contracting some muscles, that's going to cause painful sex. So when you have penetrative sex, it's going to hurt because you're contracted. So, there's a lot behind it. There's a lot of science behind it. There's enough research. It's just there's not enough awareness, and there's not enough of an open conversation for women. That's another thing that usually goes undiagnosed for a long time until it happens. Sometimes it gets diagnosed as UTIs or just like some sort of infection that is not going away. And then actually what happens is that the pelvic floor is not healthy. So, there's definitely a lot of things that you can do that are going to improve not just your health, but also your sexual life.
So 200 different types of exercises sounds insane. Mm-hmm. And all of that is, first of all, so in your app, a woman could access 200 different types of exercises. One.
Yes.
And two, is there also anything related to all your beliefs and your cultural, I'm sure there's a lot of psychological and emotional aspects that affect obviously our sexuality as men or women and our experiences around that, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like I said, like sometimes emotional trauma, it's channeled that way. So there's many, I know plenty of cases where a chronic pelvic pain case or a sexual pain case was also related to the connection between the brain and that pain, how it is perceived and anticipated, and how because of one experience that was very traumatic and hurtful, you anticipate you're going to have pain every time you're having sex. And then there's this whole circle. But there are specialists that are very focused on breaking this vicious cycle of pain, dysfunction, and the psychology of it. In our app specifically, we focus less on mental health, but we do provide a lot of information around not so much how it's culturally different because we're global. So we try to come from a perspective of across the board, pretty scientific, but we do talk a lot about the emotional impact of not being able to have pleasurable sex and of not addressing it, the emotional impact of not discussing certain things with your partner, the stigma and the wellness impact of having chronic incontinence, and how that's something that, well, if you go look in some like tribal cultures, the women that had incontinence, and this happens still in some countries in Africa, for instance, when women have fistula and they don't have any continence anymore, they are expelled from the group because they think they're tarnished or something. And and it's something that happened because of the maternal care after giving birth to several children and not having the adequate care. This is not very surprising. And then, there's all these myths and beliefs around it. And it's really heartbreaking, which is why we try to collaborate with organizations too that are doing work in that sense in terms of awareness. It's really, really, I cannot emphasize how important it is to have this conversation. There's a lot of things happening, but even at the level of here in the United States, I hear women, I see women, they write to us, they email us saying like, I've been experiencing incontinence for 10 years and all I ever got was a suggestion to wear pads or get a surgery, when actually if she had had the right information, resources, attention, and support, she could have prevented getting to that point 10 years earlier. So yeah, it's hard to get something. We're trying to build something as comprehensive as possible. And one of the key components of our technology is that women, when they get to the platform, they have to answer a lot of questions. So we need to know what their age is, if they've had any kids, if it was a C-section or a vaginal birth. We ask them about symptoms. And with all of that information, we provide personalized exercises, readings, educational contents, habits, like postural hygiene. How should I stand if I'm having this dysfunction? I have back pain, and what can I do in my daily life that it's over time going to have a great impact in my overall well-being. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love the approach that is, if you look at ancestral cultures around the world, they all worked with preventive lifestyles. It was all about, how do you maintain your life and the life of the tribe and the life of the environment around you as healthy as possible all the time, as opposed to reacting to when things go wrong or things go to shit or whatever.
And I think it's probably more of your core thing than mine, but it's probably what's happening with the environment right now. We're being reactive. We destroyed a lot of things, and now we're like, oh, wait, we need to be more ecological in the way we interact with the environment. But we had to wait until there was big problems happening in front of our eyes. And I think that that's the overarching mindset right now, and we need to shift. And I think it's starting, this shift into a more mindful type of living where people are more conscious about their mental health, their physical health, the environment around them, the relationships, the social networks that they surround themselves with, and just every aspect of how we live.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a different type of, it's definitely a mind. The most important aspect of this whole revolution that is happening around the planet is a shift in mindset. It's a shift in understanding. It's a more, you're thinking in terms of systems and how your whole life works, as opposed to just thinking linear. Oh, I have this, then I fix it with this pill, or I fix it with this cream, without even thinking why things are happening, Exactly. And it's the same that's happening with how we live, and that's why there's a regenerative agriculture revolution. That's why there's a circular economy revolution, and people are just like, oh, okay, yes. And I think there's a lot of taboo around the essentials. The essentials are food, and the most abused aspects of our lives are food and water and sex, which are the three conditions for life to exist on the planet. Without food and water, there's no life, and without sex, there's no continuity. There's no reproduction. So it's fascinating. And I was reading this book the other day, and they talked about the difference. It's a great book called Evolving Ourselves, and it's how we've been doing so many unnatural things to our lives in the last 150 years that we have evolved ourselves in a way that we're just beginning to understand, right? So the guy's like, for example, C-sections, right? And how that affects to a huge extent the bacterial composition of our gut, of our digestive system, because we're missing out on the initial most important inoculation, if you will, of microbes that is going through our mother's vagina. And that's the first one, right?
Absolutely. And definitely having the option of having safe hospital environments where C-sections can be performed is life-saving, because up until we had like a more stabilized healthcare system, a lot of women were dying during birth, because that's true. Some births are extremely complicated, and mother and child might not make it. So having that opportunity is a luxury that we have in the 21st century that was not an option hundreds of years ago. The problem is when you don't offer enough education to women, and or the financial reasons take over the human ones, or there's this culture, this ongoing culture, and it's pretty strong here. And just to give you an example, in New York, there's a 40% rate of C-section currently, which is extremely concerning. The World Health Organization has established 2 out of every 10 births, so 20% C-section rate as the regular average healthy society, and we're having 40% here, which is twice as much, which means that there's something that's being done wrong. And there's a lot of myths around vaginal birth is going to ruin your body, and if you have a C-section, then your vagina won't be ruined. And there's all these ideas that are being put into these girls and women's brains, and it doesn't have to be like that. Like I was saying, like if there were more care protocols in place for preparation for birth and for postpartum recovery, nobody's body is going to be ruined. You know, we have resources enough. So it's a pity that C-sections are sometimes performed out of fear as opposed to out of necessity. Obviously, when it's necessary, point blank period. Like, that's it. But sometimes I know there's statistics on this. I'm going to be very clear. Women are pressured into going into the C-section room when there might not be a strict need yet, which is why the figure of the midwife and the doula are starting to get more traction again, because they have a very fundamental role. Bringing babies to Earth is a midwife's role. They see hundreds of births, and they understand the process better than anyone else, and they know how to evaluate when something is wrong, really. And doulas are there to advocate for the mother. They have a very intimate relationship with the mother. They're there to support her when she thinks that she can't go any longer, which is very normal to experience during the birth process, particularly as a first-time mother, when it's a very long birth. And their role is to encourage the woman to know how she's feeling, to understand, to support, to advocate for her to have her birth plan seen through, as opposed to like big changes suddenly because there's less rooms in the hospital, or you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of other factors in place that impact a woman's birth experience, and traumatic births are not uncommon for the wrong reasons. So yeah, that's one of the things that we're very passionate about.
What's the difference between a midwife and a doula?
Oh, yeah, no, the midwife is a health professional. The doula has more of an advocate role, even though she also has some health background, but it's not established within the parameters of academic studies right now. It's more of an advocate role, a psychological support, someone that is there to talk to the woman, understand what she wants, and be there to try to make that happen. So if she wants to have unassisted birth, if she wants to have a epidural but wants to birth vaginally whenever she's in the 10th hour and she's like, I can't do this anymore, and she's there to help her. If someone starts pressuring but she's seeing that the indicators say that it's not necessary to maybe cut or induce pitocin, and she's there to advocate in a moment where a woman is the most vulnerable. And I think that the shift that needs to happen also is to stop thinking. I think there's this overarching, and this is also the experience that my mother had with my birth. My birth was pretty traumatic. It's so funny to hear her talk about it, because she thought that what happened to her was normal, because that was a mentality back then, right? She had been at the hospital for several hours during the day with contractions, being very slow at dilating, which happens to first-time mothers all the time. And so she was induced, and suddenly it was like this uncontrollable pain, because that accelerates the birth, and it's mayhem. Like psychologically, it's very hard to resist. You feel like you're completely out of control. She was, and it was all because the doctor literally said, you're not going to keep me here all night. It was already 10 p.m. and he's like, we're going to do this. And so I was out in 2 hours. By the time she got to the birth room, I was literally like exiting practically. And by the time that she had me, she was unconscious because the pain was unbearable. Wow. So imagine you're completely deprived of any significant role in the birth of your child because you're pressured into something that it's naturally progressing. There was no risk. I was totally fine. There was no heart rate dropping, no nothing. It was just, she had been there for 10 hours. It was slow, which happens many times, and she was induced, and then it was uncontrollable. And so and now there's more research about the impact that what happens, the mental health of the mother during pregnancy, the things that happen during birth and the first hours have on a baby's psyche. Because when a baby's deprived from their parents or any type of touch during the first moments, that's going against nature, the usual thing that happens. And if you observe it in mammals too, the baby gets close to the mother and they're skin with skin, right? Receiving that first touch, that first look, and now you're having like babies being taken away from their parents and then brought back God knows when. The baby doesn't understand about time. They just know there's no one there. So, I feel very passionate about this, as you can see. I don't want to go on about it. Like I'm ranting a little bit, but I just think that it's a conversation that needs to be had. And I am very pro women being very well informed without fear, with facts, with empowerment, so that they can make informed choices. If for whatever health risks experience in their family, their choice is that the best option for them is to have a C-section, that's great. If they choose not to have a C-section and then it becomes really necessary, that's great that we have the luxury of having this option. But convincing otherwise healthy people that birth is going to ruin them, I don't think that's a very healthy and natural notion. And we need to change that perspective and have women be active parts of the birth process. But I think it's an overarching just belief of the way we treat birth as a society in general. It's lost the respect that it had traditionally, I think. And it's become like a very aseptic, clinically treated, in and out type of thing. Let's get it over with. And it doesn't have the transcendence and respect it should have. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the first huge threshold of, coming into the world. Ooh. But I think it's really important the work that you guys are doing, because the more we can have access to open conversations and open information and knowledge around sex, around pelvic floor health, about women's health, men's health, and these three evolutionary drivers we were talking about, around, the more we can openly talk about the issues around food, the issues around sex, the better it is for everyone. And all these, it's part of the mindset shift that I see as well. It's going from kind of breaking through all these belief systems that have dominated for the last, 10,000 years or so, and more to a more open and natural way of understanding. I think science gives us that, and data gives us that chance too, to look at these natural processes that, I don't know, like 20 years ago, people would talk about a doula or a midwife and they'd be considered hippies or something like that. And, yeah. And maybe, yeah, but to understand that there's all these natural cycles that should be respected. Just like some people would say that, it's really wrong for us to live under different monthly cycles other than the moon cycles, which are women's cycles, right?
There's a couple companies I really like now doing a lot of research in that realm and coming up with a lot of science on how the way we've designed our lives goes extremely against the natural cycle of our bodies, and that gets reflected more in women because we have our period. And so because we're forcing our bodies to go through some motions that are not the regular ones, we have a lot more health problems that would otherwise maybe not appear. And even I have been tracking, I'm all about tracking and data lately, partly due to everything I've learned from being involved in this project. When I first started, I definitely had a passion for it. But the more I learn, the more passionate I become about it, the more I discover. There's still so much more. And this couple companies that I'm talking about are very focused on, understanding what are the different phases of our cycles and how can we adapt our lives, from our nutrition, from our activity, even like there are moments of the cycle where you're more activated, and those are great moments to do. Like even if you bring it down to work, just like moments for expansion, business development, go get it. And then there are moments where your body's preparing for your period and you're like more in a chill mode, and maybe it's a moment that is more introspective, creative. And if we didn't go against those cycles, well, it would be interesting to see what the outcomes are and how we can design a new lifestyle.
That sounds amazing. And if you could have that, I mean, it's part of the process of reconnecting, yes. Right? Replugging to the natural cycles. And we don't know because we forgot. I mean, we don't have the cognitive memory. It's not in our cells anymore, kind of thing, right? But if you have an app where you could track what's the best time of the month to do what you just described, it's amazing, because then, you know, you're at the peak of rest, or you're at the peak of productivity. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Amazing. So how has it changed you? How could you walk us through like a little bit of like, I mean, you don't have to go into everything, but give us an idea of No. I'm just saying, not in your personal history, but like how you take care of your intimate health, of your, you know, like what exercises or what routines or what are your, is it a daily thing? Is it a daily affair or?
I think that for me at the moment, the daily thing is to be aware and to dedicate a moment to just like disconnect from the busyness and the craziness of the world. Particularly, we're here in New York City. We have beautiful views right now. I wish people could see this. And it's a very crazy city. So just every day be mindful of if I feel something's off, just paying attention. I think paying attention is definitely step one. Sometimes we're so caught up in the busyness of every day that we don't listen to the signals that our bodies are sending us. So that for me is a day-to-day. Like, is my stomach digesting the food that I ate well or did it not? Did I have a heavy digestion? Did I sleep well? Or do I have any muscle tension? Or was my period weird? Was it late? What is happening? Why is that happening? You know, thinking about those things is a daily practice, like meditation, just being aware of yourself. And then there are things that for me are fundamental right now. Meditation is one of them, just for overall emotional and mental well-being, which is the beginning of everything. A lot of things start with psychological problem, and then they reflect themselves in our bodies. And also doing light exercise every day, but working out 2-3 times a week. I noticed that it really gets my metabolism going. It keeps me strong. When I do yoga or Pilates, I am very mindful of my core and my pelvic floor. So I do a lot of pelvic floor exercises just as a preventive measure and just to like be aware of that area. Other than that, just at this moment, because I'm not in like a very strong transitional period, I have a more like maintenance mode. Sometimes I do, well, recently we launched a sex plan, which is aimed at, it delivers exercises and recommendations specifically aimed at enhancing sexual sensations, either if you're on your own or during intercourse. So I've recently looked into that a lot because it's one of our new contents. So I was like, oh, I'm going to explore with this. But yes, we just launched it last week. Mm-hmm. And now we have actually the breast cancer prevention contents coming up very, very soon. Yeah, so those are going to be up and available on the first week of October. Yeah.
Sweet. That sounds exciting. So you were living in Germany, mm-hmm. right? And you were employed, yes. working for someone else. And then you had some experience that threw you out of like that set you off on your hero journey sort of thing, that brought you out of your ordinary world, and you were like, fuck this, I want to do something else with my life.
Yeah, so it was, yes, after graduated from college, I went on to live and work in Germany for a while. I had a great experience. I learned a lot, but by a year or year and a half in, I was like, I just can't do this anymore. It's very repetitive. I'm not that passionate about what I'm doing. I don't feel like I'm contributing to the world. I decided to transition, and I went back to Spain, to Madrid, to do my master's. And then I worked for another company that had a very cool mission. That was actually my first experience specifically focusing on maternal health and women's health. I was working, but more on the product side, not so much in the health, more like products, what are you going to need after birth, like creams and things. And it was very cool. And that got me even more excited about the subject. But again, my situation was that I was an employee, and I felt like there was a moment 1 year in where I had hit my ceiling. Like I couldn't go up. I had already been promoted. I had already evolved within the company. There was nowhere to go from there because I could not be the CEO. It was not my company. So, you know, at some point I was like, is there anything wrong with me? I'm never going to be happy with anything. Like, what is it? Like, I just feel like I have a lot more inside of me than coming to the same office every day, clocking in the same hours, and then going home and feeling like I live from Monday to Friday instead of living every day of the week. So I finally one day, I was like, this is it. Like, I can't do this anymore. And I decided, there was a serendipity aspect of it, because there was a girl that I kind of like knew through some friends, but we never like really connected. And one day we ran into each other and we talked, and she told me about how she was frustrated with her career and had talked to a coach, and she had completely changed the way she designed her career. And, you know, there was one day and I asked her for the contact, but I was hesitant about it for a while. And I was still kind of like trapped in the rat race, because that was what I was raised into being. I know the education system's changing a lot right now, and particularly in Spain. But back then, when I went to school, you were just being trained to become an employee and to serve someone else and do a great job and earn a living and then go home and watch TV. I don't know. And that was not for me. And so one day I couldn't do it anymore. I was profoundly unhappy. I really didn't know what was wrong with me. And so I decided to give this guy a call, Mariano. He'll listen to this one. He's been in so many of my conversations. It's just like he's walked me through the entire change process that has turned my life around by 180. And so we did some sessions, and we worked a lot on my limiting beliefs around work. Like, why does work have to be hard? Why do you think that? Who said that? Why do you think that work is something you perform for someone else who tells you what to do? Why can you not? You seem to have a lot of ideas. Why don't you just do what you believe in? And, you know, and I was like, wow, like I discovered many things. Like, I needed the validation from someone that was above me, that I had these beliefs about work is something you do to earn a living and not something that you're passionate about. That's your hobby. You know, so I had to change all of this and really sit down with him and be like, this is what I look for in a work project I'd love to, and then give up on certain things. He was like, you need to prioritize. You can't have an adventurous job where you make a lot of money, where you know that you're always going to have your needs covered, but at the same time there's so much excitement and traveling. He's like, you can't have it all. What are you willing to give up on? And I was like, particularly not at the beginning. And I do think that there's a point where you can kind of have it all in that sense, but you have to build there. Like, it's not just going to magically appear. And so I said, okay, I'm going to give up on the salary stability, because I want to try to have my own project. And then that's the first thing that you had to give up, because you don't depend anymore on a big corporation paying you a check every month. So, you know, I just worked through those uncertainties and insecurities and being comfortable in the middle of the most incredible discomfort, and launched my own website and started doing consulting with other companies. And during this time, I met my now co-founders, and we were talking about women's health. We totally matched. And one of them had this idea to solve problems for women's pelvic floor and intimate health. And I loved it. And we just started working together. Our first tests came back very positive. The response was amazing. Everybody loved it. And so it just kept growing from there. It's incredible. Like, you know, we started expanding to Latin America and then here to the United States. And the more time we spend on it, the more feedback we get from users being like, what about this issue and this one? And so we start growing as our users keep asking for more things. So, and for me, like we were talking about this before, it's when I started with this, it was the first time that I really felt like I was not living from Monday to Friday. I did not want to be that person that's complaining on Sunday night, having anxiety because they don't want to go to work the following morning. I don't have the concept of weekend really anymore, other than my friends are more available to maybe go to dinner at night, because for me, I work every day. That's not to say that I always extenuate myself. I am very mindful of that. I work a lot, but I also listen to myself when I need a couple of days off, and I take them whenever I have a chance. I organize my time. But I'm excited about every Monday. I do a lot of productive work on the weekends because I'm not getting input from calls and emails. So I do writing or advocacy work, or I prepare my speaking engagements. And so every day, because I love it so much and I love the topic and there's so much more to discover, every day is exciting. And so now when I see people that are kind of like on the fence and they're frustrated at their jobs, I'm just like, just do it. When are you going to do it? Like, try now. Like, just like, you know, it's just, you can't have it all. You can have the super high salary and at the same time have the risk, but it's going to be so fulfilling. And for me, this has completely changed my life. Like, now I live here in New York. I travel to LA, to San Francisco. I meet the most incredible professionals in the medical field, in women's health. I meet the most incredible technology professionals, the people that are really like working hard to innovate the healthcare system, to change culture, perceptions. It's a very exciting moment to be in this field.
Beautiful. And you're also, we live in this age where we can disrupt industries and all that, just being, you know, very few people with you know, not necessarily very limited resources, but you don't need to be a gigantic corporation to create change. And that's what you guys are doing. That's amazing. Where can people find you?
They can find me on Instagram. It's at _ciderstar. We'll put it in writing. It's really awkward. And then on Twitter at Estrella J Rios. And they can also find me on LinkedIn by my name, Estrella Jaramillo, or just go to www.b-wom.com. That's the company's website. I'd love for everyone to check out the app. Go to the App Store, just type B-wom, and they'll get to it. And then also follow us on Instagram, which is at Hello B-wom. And that's where we share all our news, or new sex plans, or new contents, and we share a lot of sexy stuff.
Do you have anything else to add for our listeners, for women out there who need a little extra encouragement?
Sure. I'd say if you're experiencing any symptoms or health problems that you feel ashamed to talk about, open up to someone that you feel the most comfortable with, who you know is going to be receptive, a friend or someone, and don't give into the isolation part of the shame and the taboo, because once you open up, you're going to realize that we all have common experiences, and there's going to be people out there that have gone through the exact same thing that you went through, and you're going to help each other instead of just like being preoccupied on your own. And secondly, definitely get the resources you need and advocate for yourself. Sometimes you're not going to get right away the care that you need, and you need to be prepared and educated to demand it. Yeah.
Sweet. That's another example of how the limits are just in our mind and and we can just solve things with our imagination. You know, you don't have to submit to existing models of anything if they're not working for you, and you can just, the knowledge is out there.
Specialists who are going to be aligned with what you need, and you just have to find them. Yeah.
Sweet. Estrella Jaramillo, guys. This was episode 11 of Masters of Regeneration Radio. Estrella, thank you so much for being here. This is awesome.
Yeah, it was great. So much fun.